Welcome to another episode of Hey Joe, What You Know. Brilliant to have Dan Clubbe from the Redmen TV Liverpool fan channel with us today. Dan, great to see you, mate. How are you doing? I know you were at the game last night as well.
I was, yeah, I'm tired. But first off, I want to say thanks for having me on. Massively appreciate the invite. Looking forward to getting stuck into some more Liverpool chat. But yeah, I'm okay, mate. I'm all right. Yeah, I've just about come to terms with what we watched and what we did last night. And I'm okay with it. I've made peace with it. I was a little bit disappointed walking out of the ground. But yeah, my 4 hours sleep and 5 o'clock alarm for a gym session this morning have got me feeling all right again.
Done well. Well, let's talk about that match first of all, then we'll talk about the Redmen TV and what you guys are up to. I watched it on the telly. It was frustrating from my point of view. Just to miss chances, really, I think. And I was at the Wolves game. It was the press as well. In a way, Liverpool just seem to be losing the sort of basics that got them to where they are. They seem to be losing them a bit. What were your thoughts in the stands?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment, really. I'd quite like us to regain a little bit of that poise and composure that we've shown pretty much all season long. I do feel like we have lost our way ever so slightly in that. And we were never sort of bulletproof and we never were all conquering the finished article. I've kind of maintained that viewpoint all season long. However, we were very good and we kept control of matches very well. Now, we haven't sort of unequivocally lost that either, but sort of the past 3 or 4 games, 3 or 4 weeks, however you want to sort of frame it, we have just in bits, sometimes for 10, 15 minutes, sometimes for spells of matches, certainly for a half against Wolves. We've just not quite found the same elements of we're the better team and we're going to show you the better team for the next period of time. Certainly last night was very end to end, ebbed and flowed. Like it wasn't actually that end to end. That's somewhat of a lie. There was definitely moments of that, but it was like we had a spell, they had a period in the game. It kind of went like that. And I walked out of the ground as I mentioned earlier on, a little bit frustrated. Missed chances is definitely something, and the one in particular. But because Aston Villa finished the stronger, and it felt like if anyone was going to win it late on, it was going to be them. There was a sense of ah, we got away with it, but more were we actually that good in the game? But then, like I say, over the period of time that has since transpired, I do think we were very good in the game. I've seen some of the stats, I've watched some of the clips back, some of the highlights. We played okay, but yeah, I think you're right. We haven't quite looked ourselves from earlier on in the season for a little while now. It's a wobble. It's a somewhat of a stutter. It might not be a blip just yet. And we're picking up points as well. That's the main thing. We are still taking points as we go, even though we're not quite at it, which, as we know, can be a sign of a proper football team and a sign of potential champions. But yeah, there's definitely a large part of me that would like to see us play well again and just beat teams again.
Yeah, definitely. I know Nunes has obviously got a bit of stick for his miss. Sobbers like even as well for not taking the shot on himself. What do you think about Nunez's performances? Do you think it's just a confidence thing? I know he's had spells where he's, obviously missed big chances in the past. What can we put our finger on it with him?
Yeah, it's almost impossible by this point. I've tried and I've tried and I've tried. I've been through every single sort of potential theory and I've tried nailing down what it is. Confidence has been a long-standing sort of viewpoint, I think it's fair to say, but I struggle to sort of back that up because look at what I did a few weeks ago against Brentford. Obviously, the hero in that circumstance, 2 goals, not just one, like 2 goals, and takes them both really, really well, different but really, really proper strikers' goals in many ways. And you think, okay, there you go, there's your confidence. Build off that, go get your momentum from that. And we just haven't seen it. And I know he's been in and out of the team. He hasn't necessarily started every game since then. So possibly that's affected him. I'm not quite sure. But again, it feels like since he arrived at the football club, more or less, the moments have been fleeting, the
Yeah.
good ones, obviously, and he has had them. There's no two ways about that. But we've been through 5, 6 potential reasons and ultimately perhaps excuses as to why he isn't the answer to Liverpool's number 9 conundrum. Now, for what it's worth, I think the number 9 situation is a wider conversation to be had full stop at Liverpool Football Club at the moment. I'm not sure we actually own the answer to that question right now, if I'm being really honest. But as for Darwin, yeah, it's yeah, I really struggle, and ultimately, he's ours now, and he's ours until the end of the season. Nothing can be done with that until the summer. So I'm willing to just sort of bite down on it, put your bit between your teeth, and say, okay, let's just back him to the hilt until the summer comes around, and what will be then. And obviously, what will be in terms of the season. But yeah, having defended him and having hoped more than anything else that he would come good and something would just click and we would see him just become this consistent because he has all the tools, he has all the attributes. We've seen that, in flashes since he joined the football club. We've certainly seen it when he played for Benfica against us. But yeah, something just isn't happening. And I must admit, as much as it pains me to say it, I'm at the point now where I don't think it's ever really going to happen for him.
It's a shame, isn't it? He looked a bit disinterested when he came on against Wolves. Just the sort of basics of not challenging for things, and the work rate seems to have slightly dipped with him. But yeah, well, hopefully he'll have a couple of moments which can push us over the line going
I'm
forward.
sure he will. That's the way he is. And even last night, I must admit, I was inside the ground, obviously, and when he misses the big one, the glaring opportunity, which he has to score, by the way. I know the Szoboszlai pass, not pass is a conversation, but once he's passed it and Nunes in that situation, the rest should be history. And he has the one where he almost gets sort of around Martinez, possibly could do something differently there as well. But even then, inside the ground, I was thinking, with 10 minutes to go, whatever it was, there's got to be a third moment here, and will Darwin take that one? And that's just kind of what he is as a footballer now. I think we have to sort of take the rough with the smooth, and hopefully, with the games of football that we have left to play, he can produce two or three more Brentford-esque moments for us.
Fingers crossed. Let's talk about the Redmen TV and what you guys are up to first before we go on to City and the rest of the matches. You guys have been so busy. You're doing different things all the time. Pre-match previews. You were at the game last night. You've got blogs from Chloe out as well. All sorts of stuff. What's going on?
What isn't going on. Honestly, it's crazy. Honestly, like obviously the matches are unrelenting right now, thick and fast, and this is what it's all about. Ultimately, I'd much rather be sat here having this conversation in the midst of a title race and potential European glory, and with a Carabao Cup final on the horizon as well. Like I might complain about it every now and then, just how tired I am and just how brutal the schedule can be. But it's the absolute best way to support this football club. Let's have it right. And I'm fortunate and blessed to work in the industry I do to cover it every single step of the way as well. But yeah, as you mentioned, obviously match day stuff is our bread and butter that we do day in, day out, quite literally at the moment, without any room to breathe, really. But also, aside from that, we've got lots of different features going on, different shows across the channel, what have you, on YouTube and on the website as well. We've also got a couple of documentaries in the works that people should keep their eye out for. There's one coming out very, very soon, which I've been very much leading the way on and very excited to get it out there. When it finally does sort of get shared with the world, I'll be able to tell people just how brutal my schedule's been because this doc has been, a real sort of thing for me for the past like 6 months, whilst Liverpool have been playing a game every 3 days, basically. It's been brilliant. I've absolutely loved making it and loved doing it, but it's been tough as well. It's been very hard graft. But yeah, we have everything going on all the time. We cover Liverpool every step of the way, from the academy to the women's a little bit as well. Obviously, the first team matters and what have you. We've got the Carabao Cup final, as I mentioned, coming up. We've got about 5 or 6 different sort of special ideas planned and lined up for that as well. So yeah, everyone is foot to the floor. Let's go and do this because ultimately this season has endless possibilities right now for Liverpool Football Club, and it's our duty and also our passion is to cover it. So this is what we're going to try and do.
Absolutely. And how did you get into the media in your career, and how did you get into the Redmen TV?
Good question. I'll bore you with the details. Sorry, I won't bore you with the details, I should say. I won't, yeah, that'd be boring. I worked in a different industry for like 10 years. To go further back ever so slightly, just briefly, um, I wanted to be a journalist when I was young. I went to college with that in mind and then took like a gap year type thing before hoping to go to university to study journalism. In that gap year, went over to Australia, spent 6 months over there, played cricket over there, and then come back and just wanted a job for the period before I went to university. Got a job in an IT company and didn't leave for 10 years. And it was supposed to be a 6 month thing. And then during COVID, I got furloughed like most of the world did basically, and sat at home for like 2, 3 months. And it was during that 2, 3 month period where I actually had time to think about what I was doing in my life. And I went, I do not want to do IT for another day longer, basically. So I started doing some written journalism, started pursuing what I wanted to be all my life up until a point, basically. And then, yeah, started just appearing on podcasts randomly. Anyone that would have me at that point, I was just doing it, saying yes to everything. You name it, I was on it at that time. And then, yeah, Redmen invited me in for a few sort of guest slots on shows and stuff. And then after 3 or 4 months of doing that, yeah, they invited me to come and work here. So, as they say, the rest is history. Honestly, and if anyone sort of aspiring to be in the industry is watching or listening to this, so it's not sort of a hard and fast rule for entry, but I would recommend just saying yes to stuff because you just never know. It worked for me, ultimately, a lot of good fortune in it, clearly. But yeah, I just had to get out of IT. I couldn't go back there. I took a few risks along the way in terms of pay cuts and gambles and what have you. But yeah, I just had to. Supporting Liverpool's been my life, clearly. And my dream was to work in anything even resembling this industry. So I'm very, very, very fortunate to do it. And I don't take it for granted. A lot of people might look at us as an entity and think, oh, look at the position you're in and what you do. And I don't take that for granted, not for a single second. I absolutely adore this job. I adore this football club. And ultimately, I am just a fan like everybody else that watches and listens. And it is just all opinions. But yeah, I definitely have a lot of yeah, what's the word? A lot of understanding of just how fortunate I am.
Yeah, it's great, mate. I mean, I've worked in the industry now for probably about 14 years or so. I actually started my training did my journalism training at Radio City, did a
Yeah.
3 month broadcast course up there. And lucky enough to like learn off people like Peter McDowell and, that people like those. And, got to go to the press conferences sometimes at Everton. Liverpool did a feature with Les Parry when it was at Tranmere back in the day.
Always in short, Les Parry.
Yeah,
I remember Les, yeah, always in short.
he was a good guy. Yeah, but I went to uni, did teaching, absolutely hated it. And then I met a guy called Angus Scott at uni who was elected ITV presenter, but a lecturer there as well. And one of my housemates did journalism. I managed to get a meeting with him, and he sort of, showed me where you could go. So offered me a placement at Setanta if I got the broadcast diploma. Then it went bust, of course. But it sort of set me on the way. And then I did about a year of radio, hopping around the country. I went to some weird and random little radio stations all around the UK, like Kestrel FM, Banbury Sound. Yeah, you name it. I was there pretty much covering non-league football. But yeah, like you say, you've just got to do those jobs, to get the experience and then
Yeah.
carry on from there, essentially.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Redmen.
That's all it was for me. It was just experience, sorry, like because I basically did this job for a living for 10 years prior to doing it because all I wanted to speak about was football and Liverpool anyway, in any walk of life, whether it be, again, my cricket career has been a year spent in dressing rooms talking football. My work life was speaking to anybody that would listen about football, whether it go to the gym, whatever it may be. I always wanted to speak about Liverpool. So the transition into doing it in front of cameras and in front of people was quite a natural one. There've been lots of learnings along the way, of course, where I've been fortunate enough to interview lots of former and current Liverpool players, and I've had to get better at that and understand what that looks like. But yeah, I ultimately, like I say, I'm just like everybody else, and that sounds quite arrogant, but it's really not meant to be. I am just literally a fan who's very, 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 very lucky to do what I do.
Great, mate. Well, long may it continue and long may you carry on what you're doing. Look forward to seeing a documentary when it comes out as well. Let's have a look at City at the weekend quickly. Is it a must win, do we think, this one?
Possibly, and I hate saying that about Man City away, because attaching the tag must win to a trip to the Etihad is not a world I'm comfortable living in at all, in spite of what Man City are, and what they are compared to what they used to be. And obviously, in spite of what happened to them last night, because, from a Liverpool centric point of view, it's easy to sort of overlook just how comfortably beaten they were by Real Madrid, of course, and what damage that might have done to them physically and psychologically as well. But yeah, it's still a frightening proposition being in that even remotely close to that must-win territory for City. I must admit, I went into this little run of games. very sort of bullish about what we needed and what our chances were and what the sort of potential points outcome of it all was. And that's just kind of me in the way I look at things. Again, I've got a relatively decent sporting pedigree myself, and I would always approach any set of fixtures as being like, no, win at all costs. I'm not sort of bargaining with you. I'm not taking deals on points and draws here and there. But then when it's all said and done, and actually you walk away from a ground like Villa Park having drew last night, you think it's not the worst point in the world. You can still come to terms with what you've done. So to go into City, I'm still going into it thinking, 3 points is the absolute goal and aim. Would I shake hands on a draw? Possibly. The only problem with that is what that impact is then on Newcastle, because all of a sudden Newcastle is must win. There's no two ways about that. And whilst it's at home, and I think the amount of home games we have between now and the end of the season stands us in really, really good stead. Newcastle's still a dangerous side. Like they've got Alexander Isak, and any team that owns him is a problem to me right now. So, yeah, I'm struggling. I'm wrestling with City being a must-win. However, if you were to offer me 4 points from the next two, I'd probably just about take it. My overall overriding sort of feeling on all of this stuff, if I'm being really honest, is we're a very, very good football team. Obviously, and we just are. We're a brilliant football team. I'm not sure of anything like the finished article, like I've already said. And because we're not going up against the juggernaut that was Man City, or indeed the juggernaut that was us going up against Man City, we're probably, and I believe we might just have enough to win this Premier League this season. Because I'm not sure Arsenal are going to put together anything like the run of form that's needed to catch us. I hope I'm right, obviously, in saying that. But yeah, the requirements to win this Premier League aren't quite as outrageous as maybe they once were, which is probably a good thing because, like I say, going to the Etihad, even Newcastle at home, requiring or demanding wins from those two isn't easy, especially when you are in the thick of the fixtures that we're in right now. It looks as though one or two lads are just starting to struggle a little bit from fatigue. I know Trent gets taken off earlier than we might have liked last night because of fitness. Obviously, Conor Bradley breaks down not long after. There's a few lads that are just starting to return to that well once too often, perhaps. And there's a little bit of rest coming, of course, and it might be needed. But yeah, for the next 6 days, we're going to need 12, 13 lads to really put in a serious shift, starting on Sunday. But yeah, I would bite your hand off, bite your hand. I'm willing to say 6 points might just kill it. Because not just because of the points and the momentum and all sort of stuff, but what that does to Arsenal. They're starting to look at a door slightly ajar now, I think, following last night. We pick up 6 from 6 in these next two, that door slams shut again. And that's kind of where I want us to be.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely think that would be the case, wouldn't it? I think Arsenal will build up some momentum now. I think that's just what will happen. I think they're sort of on the sort of trajectory for it, and they'll have a few players coming back soon as well. The likes of Saka, you know, he'll be important for them in the running. I think they did quite well in the second part of last season. They picked up, around 34 points. So there's potential for them to sort of, be there and thereabouts. But again, it's if we open that door ajar and ajar. So yeah, um, I would have liked to have seen Trent stayed on for most of the game yesterday. I think he was coming into a purple patch after the goal, and we might have just snuck it. I don't know what your thoughts were seeing it live.
No, no, I think that's a fair point. I must admit, I was somewhat surprised when it was him that was taken off because I think you're right. He just started to look like he wanted to take the game by the scruff of the neck. Actually, he wanted to be the driving force and the reason as to why we were going to go on and win it. Obviously, celebrated the goal more than you usually see Trent celebrate a goal. Really felt like a moment for him, and like I say, one where he was willing to go the extra mile and drag us with him. But the devil's advocate side of me, because obviously post match I didn't realise what the reasoning was for that. I had a hunch it might be fitness related, clearly, and Arne Slot obviously comes out and says it is fitness related. So whilst we as fans can all sit here and say, well, Trent's just started to run the show, he's just started to be the one to pull all the strings, and maybe he's going to be the one to win it for us. Arne Slot will be thinking, I know he's only got X amount of minutes in him. If he can see that. He can see that better than all of us can. Of course he can. But he might be thinking, I'm torn because if I keep him on for the extra 10 minutes, he might produce a moment of magic that does take us into the lead, whatever. But also, I keep him on for extra 10 minutes and he sits on his arse, his hamstring's gone. Like, he's done himself no favours for the next 4, 5, 6 weeks potentially there. So sometimes in the modern game, you just have to listen to the sports scientists, and he's got a team of people around him for a reason. If he pushes back on them, then what does he do to his relationship further down the line? Like Trent won't have thanked him for taking him off last night. It looked like the opposite, to be honest with you. Trent looked like a guy who felt like he was in a moment, he was in his groove, he found his mojo. He felt like he could well propel us to 3 points. However, in the fullness of time, had Trent have stayed on, or let's live in a different universe where he does stay on and his calf goes, his hamstring goes, whatever, because he's had problems recently, he's not long back from something. Yeah, that also wouldn't have been particularly brilliant. So annoying at the time, definitely, but perhaps understandable is kind of where I'm at.
He'll be probably be putting some extra minutes in now as well. Bradley went down, unfortunately. Yeah, but we will see. So yeah, the next one I suppose is the Carabao Cup final. Your plans around that? I know we're looking a bit ahead a bit, but just to get something in the bank, what are you sort of planning at the Redmen TV for that one?
Loads. Anyone who was sort of privy to or across our coverage of it last time, it's a similar sort of feel. We had a chat earlier on this week actually about what we were going to do. It's a very similar sort of vibe actually, with a couple of extra bits thrown in for good measure as well. A couple of special preview type shows. Chris will do his brilliant deep dive shows with Josh and a special guest, who I'm not willing to mention right now, but a special guest. And I do an Oppo preview show as well every week, which usually features like a journalist or a former player from whoever it is we're playing against on that particular occasion. I've got a special one of them lined up as well with a Newcastle player who played. I'm speaking off the cuff a little bit here, but he definitely played upwards of 300 games for Newcastle, maybe even more than that, to be honest with you. So that'll be in person as well. So looking forward to that chat with him. Yeah, just our usual content, I would describe it as, but with a little bit of sort of stardust sprinkled on it is probably the best way of doing it. Yeah, extra features, that sort of thing. I want to say we've got about 5 or 6 different bits lined up. And yeah, it'll feature names that are highly recognizable and not just our faces.
Sounds good, Sam. One thing I was going to ask you about before we went on to this bit was, I suppose, leading on from Trent and then looking at the contract situation with those three guys, and then also the team in the summer. Do you think there's going to be a big overhaul of this squad in the summer?
Let's start off by saying so much that depends on the contracts, doesn't it? It really, really does. And I'd love to sit here and say I still think all three of them are going to sign. I'd be lying if I said that, to be honest with you, at this point. I had lots of positive energy towards that 3, 4 months ago, but that's just started to dwindle and to wane the longer it's gone on. I'm still hopeful if that's the case, of course I am. Confident is a different word entirely. But yeah, so much of what our summer business looks like hinges on that, of course. But if I was speaking truthfully, I've mentioned a couple of times during this chat that I don't think Liverpool has finished the article. Now, the unfinished Liverpool could well go on to lift the Premier League, possibly Champions League, hopefully the Carabao Cup as well, of course. So that's not a bad place to start from, I think it's fair to say. Arne Slot inherited a brilliant squad. He's been at pains to stress that time and time again. And he's right, ultimately, because lots of quality in there. However, having said all of that stuff, I think there's 1, 2, possibly 3 areas of this squad in terms of the personnel and in terms of the style and in terms of the profile of player that he has, that he would look at and go, that's not the answer to what I want. I think the nine's one, the left back's probably one. Not so much style wise, the left back. I just think both of them haven't had brilliant campaigns thus far. I think they've had okay campaigns. I think some of the criticism's been a little bit over the top, if I'm being really honest. But yeah, it feels like we've come to a point now in Andy Robertson's career whereby maybe he can't be the out and out first choice left back every week. I don't think Costas Tsimikas has necessarily taken his chance to grab that shirt and be that guy either. So it feels like something could be done there. I think another midfielder to dovetail with Gravenberch a little bit would be really important. But yeah, the nine is probably the biggest point I'd say on this. I alluded to the fact earlier on. I think Diaz, that experiment is fine,
Yeah.
not wholly convinced by it personally. I don't think it's a long-term solution. Diogo Jota, whilst on his day, clinical, numbers merchant. Obviously, injuries are a thing. He hasn't really looked himself in recent weeks either. I think it's fair to say. Big miss last night as well as the Darwin Núñez one. And then, of course, there's Darwin Núñez, which we already discussed in detail. So I think it'd be a bit of a stretch to say all three of them could leave the football club, personally. I don't really want that to happen. That feels like too much upheaval. However, it wouldn't shock me at all if two of them left. Wouldn't shock me in the slightest. I'm not sure which two that'll be. I think I know one of them almost for certain, but I'm not sure which two out of the three. But yeah, I feel as though it's crazy to sit here and say, given what's still on the cards for Liverpool this season in terms of silverware, but I actually believe there's a huge summer coming. I think Arne Slot, a year into the job, Richard Hughes, a year into the job, will have a much better understanding of what's available in terms of the market, the finances, the ins and outs, the inner workings. Arne Slot will know his squad miles better than he did when he arrived at the football club, of course. I just think there's a lot of changes to be made. Five or six tweaks of personnel, ins and outs here and there, which is a big summer. Not to mention the contract stuff, of course, as well. So yeah, there's a couple of lads on the periphery who I think will have roles to play moving forwards. I think the future of Jayden Danns looks really, really promising. Possibly James McConnell falls into that conversation as well. There's a couple of lads out on loan right now. Lewis Koumas and Ben Doku, I think, could have parts to play in these conversations too, personally. Possibly Owen Beck as well in terms of the left back, depending on what we do there. So, yeah, lots and lots of moving parts this summer. But I don't envisage a quiet summer. I think almost regardless of what we end up doing and achieving this year, which I hope is absolute unbridled success, of course I do. I still feel as though there's an opportunity come sort of June, July time to draw a line under that success and be like, that was brilliant. However, if we're going to become mainstays at the top table in Europe domestically, because we can't account for City being so poor again. We have to just imagine that City will come good, regardless of what the punishment is. Likewise, Arsenal. The benchmark for winning Premier League titles has been 95 points plus, there or thereabouts. We've experienced that, of course. That we have to view that as what that will return to. It will return to type. That will be it. The what we win on this year will be a not the norm, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So we have to plan and build a squad and have a summer that looks like going and doing 95 plus next year. And that feels like quite a busy one. But people often say to us, and we get a lot of criticism, whatever, it's whatever. But people often say to me and us as a collective here, like, um, that like transfers aren't what we want, so we don't want Liverpool to sign players and what have you. It's funny because I love Liverpool signing players. Let's get that. I want Liverpool to be the best possible version of Liverpool Football Club because the best thing for us as fans first, but also literally as an enterprise, are transfers and winning games of football and trophies. That's the best thing that could possibly happen to us as a thing. Um, so yeah, and transfers are a massive win for us. The people who come on stuff and socials and say you just don't want Liverpool to sign players, like that harms us in every single sense of the word. Like it really does. So I love when Liverpool sign a player. The Federico Chiesa, all you have to do to understand what I'm talking about here is look at how much work we put in when we do sign a player. I do like five, six shows on that player. Like it's absolute gold to us as a company. Like so, yeah, I am expecting a busy summer. That's for Liverpool and probably for me as well, to be honest.
Just to make it nice and quiet for you, eh, Dan?
I love it. I moan about it all the time, but I'm a very as busybody. That's it. I'm a worker. I think I describe myself as, and I hope others would do the same. But I do work. I like working. I don't like not working. It's not my style.
I think it's going to be a busy summer. I think it needs to be. I think there's certain elements of the team, like you say, which are a little bit stale, um, overall. But last one for you. I know you got busy things to do today.
Press conference soon, yeah.
Um, who's your best ever Liverpool player? Favorite all-time player for LFC?
Oh, I mean, it's just Stevie in it, really. Like as much as I'd love to sit and say Salah. I think it's so era dependent, isn't it? Obviously, but yeah, on the pitch, it's Stevie. It has to be Stevie. He was my entire childhood. He was everything to us growing up. Let's have it right, like it really was. And the exploits of Mo Salah, probably actually more recently, and this one's slightly removed from what people would sort of categorize their usual favorite player as. Only ever so slightly though, because obviously Stevie was all conquering, dragging us through games of football, taking us to trophies almost single-handedly. Sorry, Cara. Mo Salah, the numbers speak for themselves, ridiculous, and long may that continue. But if it wasn't those two, I'd be very tempted. I mean, Fowler was a god, literally unbelievable. I adored him. But Bobby Firmino, I had such a soft spot for Bobby Firmino, and still do. And I was lucky enough to work quite heavily on the documentary we did on him. Lucky enough to meet him before he left as well. Like Bobby was something else, man. And Bobby's the exact type of footballer that I love to watch. I love Bobby because he was so aesthetically pleasing, he was so good to watch. He was just so brilliant on the eye. Thiago was similar in many ways as well. As much as he never really got going in Liverpool shirt, those moments and the turns are just an absolute joy. I like watching that type of player myself. But yeah, it'd have to be Stevie because again, my entire childhood was watching Stevie just be Liverpool Football Club more or less.
We could do a Thiago at the minute as in a cameo role, eh?
Fellow was a genius, man. Yeah,
He,
I know. Again, I know it didn't work for him, but just watch him kick a ball for 5 minutes and worth the entry fee alone, as they say.
yeah, that Champions League goal against Porto as well. But I just glided in.
Special
Yeah.
footballer.
Dan, thanks very much for joining me today. Absolute pleasure. Let's hope the Reds can go on and do what they need to do this season, bring home some silverware. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you soon.